Okay, you guys, serious question. Is it like just me, or do y'all have words that you constantly spell wrong but never commit them to memory, like the right way to spell them? Asparagus is one of those words for me. Hey, what's up you guys? I'm Caitlin from Leafy Alone Plants, and today we are joined here by my beautiful asparagus fern. Now, you might also know this plant as the lace fern or the Plumosa fern, or if you're a little on the fancier side, the Setaceus fern. All the same thing, all gonna be the same care requirements. And despite the fact that this plant looks a little on the delicate side, believe me when I say it is super easy, so don't get scared away from these. So if you already have one of these plants, or if you are looking to get one of these plants, then keep on watching and we're gonna talk about how to keep him happy and healthy. Now, as I had mentioned, this plant goes by a lot of names. One thing to be mindful about is there are a couple other varieties of asparagus fern. You have one that kind of is similar to this one, but instead of having the small little leaflets, it kind of looks like little fireworks. Then you of course have the foxtail fern, which basically looks like these big puffy sprigs coming out. Now, if you have those plants, they're also going to be very similar in care, slightly different. I've had foxtail ferns before, and I find those to be a little more finicky than this one, but overall they're pretty much the same. Now, if I had $1 for every time I've said fern in this video so far, I'd at least have enough dollars to go buy like 5 more plants.
Get in, loser, we're going shopping.
But the funny thing about this plant is it's actually not a fern at all. It's actually part of the tulip family, which I don't really get from looking at this plant, but it can get little flowers on it. I'll put them over here. Maybe that's where it comes from. Also related to lilies. So yeah, if you're ever looking for fun plant trivia, actually not a fern. Getting into the basics of caring for this plant. So as for sunlight, these plants can go anywhere from a bright indirect light to a moderate light situation. And I've had this guy in both. So for the longest time, I had this guy sitting right in my windowsill, and he was growing super fast, doing really well. The only problem with that is the place where he was, it was basically hidden behind a picture frame, and I was constantly forgetting about this plant. Now, I'll bring him a little closer. You may or may not be able to see it on here, but there is a little bit of crisping on that plant, and that really was just a combination between probably getting a little too much light, but also me missing those waterings. So I have now recently moved it into a place that has a little less lighting, but I hopefully will not forget to go in and water this guy. Now, when I think of fern, I think of humidity, and of course these not being a fern, despite looking like they would really need humidity, I find that they're really just fine without that much. Now, you may notice that you are getting some leaf drop, and when these little leaf pieces do drop, it's super annoying. It's basically like the equivalent of if you took a bag of glitter and threw it all over, like you basically never get rid of it. I'll see if I can take a picture of it. It's basically these little like downy furs that get all over the place. But again, don't let me scare you away from this plant. I truly adore taking care of it, and it doesn't happen very often. It's really just if you forget to go in with those waterings. So medium to bright light, humidity, not that big of a factor. As for watering, as you heard me mention before, when I was forgetting to go in and water these, I was kind of getting an adverse reaction from this plant. It was crisping up a little bit. So I basically just like to always keep the soil pretty moist at all times. Not soaking wet, but once I notice the top couple inches starting to dry out, that's when I go back in and give them some water. Now, on the other hand, if you are giving it too much water, which I've, believe it or not, done before, me the underwaterer, but yeah, if you give it too much water, these, instead of turning crispy and dry, they will actually start to turn yellow. And in my experience, when that happens, the easiest way to tell is instead of when they're dry and crispy, how you can basically touch them and all the little leaflets fall off, they tend to stay on there and it's just like yellow leaves. So be sure not to give it too little, but also not to give it too water, and you'll be in really good shape. Now, as for these plants when they mature, so they can get to about 3 feet tall in maturity, but there's a lot of different things and different ways that you can basically kind of coax this plant into growing. So some people I see have them kind of keep them and they just progressively grow larger and larger, basically in the form that I have mine now, where it's kind of like a weird little cluster of trees. Some people put them in a hanging basket, and once they get long enough, the weight will basically drag these arms down and have them spill over. And then conversely, I've actually even seen some people who end up trellising them up. I don't think that they naturally climb on their own, but I think that you can kind of lock them into place, and they'll be happy doing that too. So really a styling way that you can do these for everybody, just depending on your preference and what you have room for in your home. Now, a couple more things to note as this plant does mature. They can get little spines on them the older that they get. Mine personally right now does not have that, but I hear a lot of people mention when they have these bigger plants, that if you're handling them, just be careful when you're handling them because they can have those spines that can prick you. Now for me, this plant has always grown super fast. I think part of that is due to the fact that I was giving it such a bright indirect light, but I remember when I had purchased this plant, it was the only one. I was at like one of my big local box stores and I got it in like a little 3-inch pot. It was so tiny, it was so small and adorable, and at the time I had no idea what it was. I literally didn't know what this plant was probably for like about a year, and then finally somebody identified it for me. Yeah, basically as soon as I got it, it really just took off. And interestingly enough, where this plant gets its name Asparagus Fern from is the way that these leaves come out. So I don't really have too many that look super new, but I'm gonna try and show you these ones right here and maybe you'll be able to see what I'm talking about. So when the leaflets first come out, they basically are like folded up straight. I don't think you can see that, so I'm going to give you a little demonstration. Basically, imagine that I am a new stalk coming out of this fern. When the plants come out, these branches and the leaflets, instead of being splayed out, they basically come out like this, and then over time they like spread their wings. Or leaves, or whatever they have. But moral of the story, reason why they're called asparagus, basically when they're like standing up like this, they have all their little leaflets folded up. It looks like asparagus, okay? Okay. Now you might be looking at this plant and be thinking to yourself that it is a little bit pot bound, and you would probably be right. I find that these plants really don't mind being pot bound, but also for me, this might be a little bit of an unpopular opinion. I don't really like how these plants look when they get big, but I love them when they're small. So I really want to do everything I can to kind of keep this guy smaller. I prune him back pretty often, and honestly, he's really kind of overdue for a little bit of a trimming. I like to kind of trim off these rogue pieces that are like way out there and keep it more just looking like a tiny little forest in there. Again, just my personal preference, but if you have yours in a smaller pot, don't stress about it too much. Don't stress about repotting it. They'll tolerate it totally fine. One of my other favorite things to do with these plants is mist them. Now again, I don't really think that they need that humidity. It doesn't seem to make too much of a difference, but the reason that I love misting them is because these little leaflets are so small, the little water bubbles get trapped on them and it looks like your plant is glittering, and it is just so beautiful. So if you have one of these and you have one of those like little handheld misters, I recommend misting your plant at least once just to see what it looks like. Okay, well I think that is everything that I had to go over today, but as always, if you guys have questions about this plant that I did not answer, drop them in the comment section down below and I will do my very best to get back to you quickly. If you learned something that you did not know in this video, or if you enjoyed my beautiful interpretation of how an asparagus fern grows, then please consider giving this video a like, and don't forget to hit that subscribe button for more beautiful demonstrations like that in the future. Thank you guys so much for checking out this video, and I hope to see you in the next one.